Hello, and I'm going to quickly show you how to rig a wave in 3ds Max using simple morph targets and the reaction manager. The wave that we'll be creating is much like the ones that you can see in the movie Surf's Up, sort of like this one here on the left. It's a pretty simple technique in theory, but it can get pretty technical. I figured out most of this by searching for Surf's Up PDF in Google, and there's a document here called The Making of the Animated Documentary. That's a SIGGRAPH article from 2007 that goes over a lot of the anatomy of how they created it and a lot of the technical information that's needed to create a similar effect. The base of what's going to drive the effect that we're going to create is on page 68 of this article, where they go over the actual curved profiles of a wave over time, and these are what we're going to use as morph targets for our wave. The technique that we're about to use is something that I found in a CG Talk article, and this guy Harvey here came up with this technique, and this tutorial is based on what he did. He provided his scene file, so I dug through it and decided to make this tutorial because I thought it was really helpful information. His website is studio4031.com, which is under construction right now, but I'm sure it will be up and running soon. So, in 3D Max, the first thing that we're going to need to create is the actual spline shapes that drive it. Now, the ones that I have here, I've pre-made because I won't waste your time watching me create splines, but I created them based off the actual image from that article. I brought that into 3D Max and then traced them. The only thing you need to know while you're making these is create one from the other when you're making each of these splines. And the reason for that, I'll show you here if I just hide this, is you want the same amount of control points from this shape to this shape. You want them to line up so it evolves really naturally. So the way that I did that is I created the first one, which is just this really simple shape, and then when I was creating this one, I did a shift drag to clone it, and then adjusted the points from there, mostly moving vertically with them just to make sure it's, you know, a natural move, because if your points get shifted down or something like that, or they get moved over too far like that, you'll see that happen while your morph is happening, and it will probably have some undesired effects. So once you have those curved profiles traced, that is what's going to drive this entire effect. Alright, so to start the effect, we're going to grab our bottom morph target here and shift drag on it to duplicate it. Click OK, and then we're going to center that to the origin. This is going to be where the wave begins. It's going to begin and end at the same place. So we will add a morpher modifier to it, which can be found right here. And now we just need to add these control splines into the morpher as morph targets. And now I've named them control spline 1 through 10, just so I can put them in order easily, because we definitely want them to go in this exact order that we've drawn here in splines. So I'll hit load multiple targets, and I will load in the first one, and then I need to add progressive morph targets in here so it will move from one to the next. So I will hit pick object from scene, and since we already have the first one added, I'll add number 2, then 3, and so on. Now that I have all of them added, I want to make sure that they're in the right order, so it says 1 through 10. If they're not, you can use these arrow keys to move them up and down. Since they are, we can drag this little spinner here and see on our wave, if I zoom in, we'll see that it's evolving from one to the next. And the more your control points line up when you're drawing them, the smoother this transition will be. If you see any popping, like I do have some weird movement here, that could be fixed by adjusting some of the control splines, or even adding some morph targets in between. You can add as many as you like. So now that we have this connected here, we're going to use a controller to drive that. So I have this pre-made controller here. There's nothing special about this. This is just a spline that I made, and I only made this ahead of time so as not to waste your time watching me make it. But it's a simple shape. We're just going to use it. You can use anything. You can use a helper, whatever you like. So the first thing that we'll do, I'm going to clear the keys off of this, so I'll show you exactly what we're doing. I'm going to first hit auto key, set a key at 0, then I will move to frame 80, and I will move it forward, and I will also rotate it 180 degrees. And the rotation is what is going to control this value in the morph target right here. We're going to connect that to the rotation, and we can do that right now. That will be connected using the reaction manager inside of 3D Max. So if I click on our target here and then go to the animation menu and then hit reaction manager, I'll move this to the side, if you haven't used the Reaction Manager before, it's a pretty powerful tool that's used for remapping values. The way that it works is there's a master and a slave in this list. The master is going to be the control that we modify, and when we modify that control, the slave, which is up here, the slave is going to be the one that changes along with it. In our case, we'll want the rotation that we have just keyed to control the morph of this. So I will hit add master. Our master will be the X rotation of this spline shape that I have, and now we will add a slave to that, and then I will click on the spline here and go to modified object morpher control spline 1. Now what you have in the Reaction Manager is states, where state 1 is set to a value of 0 right now. What that means is when the rotation is at 0, the morph target will be at whatever value you set here. And right now it's set to 0, and that's what we want. We will add a new state by clicking this arrow right here, and then state 2, we will set the rotation to 180 degrees, and we want our morph target to be at 100 at that point. So now you'll see when I drag forward in the timeline, as our spline shape rotates, our morph target moves through the morph shapes. I'm going to pull up my layer manager and hide. First I'll move this to a layer that we can actually see it, but then I'll hide these ones back here so they're not getting in the way. But you can see what's going on here as we rotate. It's controlled. The next thing that we need to do is to make our wave move with this point, and the way that we do that is to use a linked xform modifier. Now the way that we'll want to use the linked xform is to create another point so we don't link it to the rotational information of this controller, and I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. So I will create a point, just a standard point, and I will hit Alt A to align it. After I hit Alt A, I clicked on my spline shape here and we'll align the pivots, make sure that all checks in. And now that it's aligned, I'm going to go to the animation menu, hit constraints, and hit position constraint. And now that I have this pull thing here, I will click on the spline. And now you'll see that this is sort of parented to this spline shape, except it doesn't also rotate with it. The reason that we wanted it to work that way is because when I go to my spline shape, if I add a spline select modifier, that's the one that we will use. It's going to be a sub-object link. So when I hit spline select, we'll see all of our control points here. I'll grab our control points, just like that, and now I will add a linked xform modifier. This little window that I have popping up is called active type. That's a simple script that you can download that pulls up a little menu based on a hotkey. So when I hit my little hotkey here, I can type in linked, and it shows whatever modifiers you want. You can also do some scripting in there too. So once I have linked xform, I will hit pick control object, and just to show you why, I'm going to link it to our original shape first. So now as I drag through, you'll see that it rotates with our other shape, and we don't want that. We just want the position information. So instead of that, I will pick the control object as our constrained point right here that you can see in the middle. And then to make it so we don't see our points here, I'm going to add another spline select modifier and then click it to leave subobject mode, and now you'll see that we have a spline that is morphing according to the rotation, and it's moving in the y-axis according to the position here. So this is the basic setup of this whole rig. We just need to make a couple more of these to drive the whole effect. So the way that I'll do that is to duplicate our controller here, and I'm going to keep all of them the same until the very end, and then I will go ahead and offset the keys. But for now, I'm just doing shift drag here to set up some more controllers, and then I'm going to duplicate this line as well. Before I duplicate it, I'm going to turn off the linked xform modifiers so the duplicates won't also be linked right away. I can also hit Control V to duplicate, so I'll do that, and then I will do Alt A to align them, Control V, Alt A, and now that everything's lined up, I'm going to quickly throw in some points that match up. I'm not going to duplicate these because that one's constrained, and it might be faster to just align these ones than to bother with removing the constraint and then doing that. So get those lined up, and now we just need to hook up all of the splines. So we'll need to make sure our spline select still works, go into linked X form, set it to our new point, turn it on, and then do that for the rest of them. Okay, so now that we have that all hooked up, we just need to go into the animation menu and go to our reaction manager and make sure all of the reactions are set up appropriately. You'll see that it automatically added all the rest of them to the first master here, so now this controller controls all of them right now. We just want to make separate controllers for each of them so we can offset them, and that will give us a gradual wave shape. So I will just click Add Master, and then I will add the X rotation for all of these controllers. Now that I have all of the masters added, I'm going to add the slaves for each one. And I went in order here, so I'll know that this slave is going to be right here on the modified object, and so on. Once we have the morphers added, we just need to add the states for each morpher. We have the first one set up, so we go to the second one, add a state, make sure that when it's at 180 degrees, the morpher is at 100, and do that for the rest of them. Okay, now that all of our reactions are set up, we should be able to drag through and they all move how they should. They're evolving based on the rotations. You can click these individually and test them to make sure that they're controlling the correct spline, which it looks like they are. I will quickly throw that position constraint on those points. You'll see that our waves aren't quite moving yet. So I will just go into our animation, constraints, position constraint, make sure that those are all updated. Now that these are all updated, you'll see that our spline control points move along with everything else, except this one, because I just need to turn them on, just like that. So, now we are pretty much set up. This is the majority of the effect right here. All we need to do now is use these as bones for a plane. The way that I'm going to create the plane is by duplicating one of these lines, and I'm going to remove the effects off of it. And the reason for doing this is to make sure that we have an edge loop on all of the control points to make sure that it skins well. So I will throw an extrude modifier on it, and then you can see what I mean here. If I rotate this 90 degrees, I'll just do a quick convert to editable poly, you'll see that we have these edge loops lined up at the points because extrude extrudes off of all of those points. So I will go into vertex mode here, grab all of these verts. My snaps are on vertex, so if I turn on my snaps with the S key, then drag over to here, we line them up, leave subobject mode, and then I can center the pivot and center it to origin. This tool that I'm using here on the left is a custom tool, but if you need to center the pivot of your object, you can do that in the hierarchy menu by hitting Effect Pivot Only, then Center. And to get it in the center of your scene, you can use these values down here. You can just right-click right here, and it will zero them all out, or you can just type 0 in there. But once we have them in there, we will quickly jump into subobject mode again because it seems that these aren't lining up, and I just want to make sure that all of these points go right to the edge here, just like that. So now that our wave is all hooked up, our reaction manager is good to go. Now we just need to throw a skin modifier onto this plane, and then the bones are going to be these control splines here. So I'll hit Add, and our control splines 11 through 15 right here. I'll hit Select, and then as we drag through, you'll see that our plane now morphs with these shapes here. Now, to get an interesting shape, what I'll do is I will just grab all of these and then hold Alt and drag to deselect the first one, and I'll grab these keys and I'll slide them down a couple of frames, then deselect again, grab all the keys, slide them down, deselect, slide down, and this is obviously just to give a little bit of offset to the keys so the wave has, some directionality to it. If I hit F4, I can turn off the wireframe so we can see a little bit better, and this is kind of a side-to-side wave that we have going on here. Now we can add a turbo smooth to this to make the wave a bit smoother. We will add this first turbo smooth before the skin. You want to be careful about how many iterations you use before the skin, because if you use too many, you'll see that you start to have these weird jagged edges, and that's because the bones are pulling up right on these edge loops, so you don't want to have too many in between where they don't interpolate correctly. So I'll leave this at 2. And you can start to see how you can use this rig to control what the shape of this might be. You can create some interesting looking waves with this, and then if you want it even smoother, you can add another turbo smooth on top of all of that. And this is how you rig up a wave in 3ds Max. This tutorial, as well as future tutorials and projects, can be found on my website, which is joshclo.com. I have a tutorial section where I'll be posting any future tutorials that I create. I will also be including the project file for the project that we did today, so you can download the scene, poke through it, and do whatever you like, see what you can learn from it. So hope that helps.